Welcome to another episode of the Holistic Sister Circle. Today we have Karolina here with us. She is a clinician turned life coach. She's been practicing for over 20 years, has an MS in psychology and PhD in physical therapy. She works with clients with her 360 befriending your life approach. She is also a speaker, an author, and really focusing on distinguishing somatic high performance coaching, holistic behavioral consulting, and dedicated life coach. She has transformed lives from the brink of burnout to a state of harmonious balance without sacrificing productivity with an impressive educational background. And one of the things that I really, really loved about just honestly learning from Karolina is she literally is the expert on expert when it comes to just understanding productivity, performance, and really making sure that you're living a balanced life. So, Karolina, thank you so much for being a part of the Holistic Sister Circle today. We are so grateful to have you.
Thank you so much, Ria, for having me.
You're very welcome. So before we get into it, because we had a really hot topic hot off the press, and that was really talking about the FTC acts to stopping online business coaching. Now, before we get into that though, I would just love for you just to kind of share how you actually stumbled into life coaching and why you thought that this was going to be the best forum for your clients overall.
So interestingly, it kind of was a stumble because my clinical degrees are from Europe. And if you ever know how the system in the United States, where I currently live, works, it's very difficult to translate anything to clinical work. So I was allowed to teach at university and colleges for about 20 years, but the same degrees did not transfer to my clinical background. And I would basically have to take the classes I was teaching. But in a process of going through that bureaucratic frustration, I also realized that what I do doesn't fit a box. So yes, I have a MS in psychology and I have a PhD in physical therapy. And even when I was in my early 20s, I always broke out of the mold. So for example, my PhD is in autism and horses and using multidimensional approach to any kind of treatment or performance. So where it came handy is that as a life coach, I can use all of my modalities and all of my coaching versus if I get pick point one licensing, you only allowed to use that little box. And then if you want the other box, you have to get the other license and not mix them. So my form of coaching is not clinical work, and I don't work anymore with clinical clients, but it allows me to utilize all of my knowledge, my neuroscience, my biomechanics, my nutrition, all of that to encompass the mental work, the behavioral changes, all of that to work with a client, whatever they bring to the table.
That actually makes total sense because I've worked with so many coaches in the past, and I'm pretty sure that other people could attest to this too, that sometimes it feels like they want to pigeonhole you into this one box. And when you start working with different people, it's like, okay, well, I do have a lot of different, I'm very creative, I have different talents and, education and background. And sometimes it makes more sense to cater to that specific person's needs depending on how they're coming to you. Have you had any situations in the past where you may have had clients, where they felt like just maybe other people they have had worked with in the past, kinda pigeonholed them and they really appreciated your
So
level of service with
interestingly, a
them?
lot of my clients who come from therapy say that I'm much more effective than a therapist because, again, in a psychotherapy, in a talk therapy, you are pigeonholed to the box, and especially if you're using insurance, then you are even more pigeonholed into codes and all of that. But I also had clients who come to me from a perspective of, let's say, maybe mentoring other coaches and saying, well, the way you teach works with how I'm wired. So a lot of my clients are neurodiverse. They have ADHD, they have maybe somewhere on a spectrum, maybe they twice exceptional, they're very high intelligence, but something else, right? So it's understanding the single person in front of you. And yes, group format has its place, and I use it as well. Programs have its place, but at the same time, every person in that program has a little more verified needs. Even if you take a group of people with ADHD, there are different types of ADHD. And you have to distinguish, and maybe someone has anxiety and maybe someone is ADD and maybe someone is really hyperactive, and you have to address that sensory need. And you can't just say, this tool worked for me, so it's going to work for everyone. So it's really understanding the person in front of you. And sometimes it's just common sense. I literally enroll a client today, and she's tried everything in theory. But sometimes it's just simplifying. It's like, how about we just make a plan and do one step at a time? It doesn't have to be always complicated and scientific. Maybe it's just the basic common sense of simplifying what you learn. There is knowledge. I think we live in the time when knowledge is easily accessible. Application of that knowledge is a totally different story, and understanding exactly what are you listening to and what are you reading and what are you taking and how can you apply that to your life or to your client's life. That's a very different story. I mean, let's take healthy living or diets or nutrition. Low carb, low fat, which one? And you can go on PubMed and there are studies saying this one is best and this one is best. And in reality, it depends on your body and your genetic makeup and everything else. So, so I think when we talk about pigeonholing coaches, it's more for marketing purposes. And that I have to a little bit agree. Unless you have a budget of Pizza Hut or Pepsi Cola or any of those huge companies, it's very difficult to market to everyone. So when you're crafting your marketing message, you have to some extent, attract people within a scope. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult and very diluted. But it doesn't mean that you cannot work at the same people with other, within your skills, of course, with other configurations. And even in that, I hate the word target market because it's like I'm shooting people. But even in that box, there is a lot of diversity, right? So for the marketing purposes and for the, another lovely word, your rate of return, right? On your effort, it's wise to know what's your powerhouse, but it doesn't mean that you have to go down into a niche and stay in that.
Right. No, I feel like you said that so beautifully. And to be honest with you, there's so many people that have been on the show just already who fall into that, they're coaches. They're coaches. A lot of female entrepreneurs really connect with us as well. And I think it's so important to just hear from your perspective as to what are some things that I can take away as a coach. Maybe I'm doing some things that maybe my clients or are feeling like pigeonholed or feeling like they can't, consistently connect with me in certain areas of their life. And I think it's so important that you're able to say, okay, the difference between that is, your marketing and your messaging is going to be completely different of how you actually interact with that person when they come on board with you within that customer journey. Now, for what we've all been waiting for, I would love for us to get into this topic. So when we talked a couple of weeks ago, we talked about just the FTC Act to stop online business coaching schemes. And I know that, a little bit of this was, we were like, okay, what is happening here? What's going on? So one, I would love for you to share just what you've captured from this. I'll read a little bit of it here. I do have an article pulled up. It says, proposed court orders would stop deceptive practices, require Learn and its CEO to turn over $2.5 million for consumer redress. The Federal Trade Commission is taking action to stop business coaching sellers from making unfounded claims that consumers can make significant income by starting an array of online businesses. The company and spokespeople have agreed to court orders that will require them to stop their unlawful practices and require them to turn over $2.5 million to the FTC to be used to refund money to consumers they've harmed. Even after receiving a notice of penalty offenses, Learn uses bogus earnings claims to convince people it would teach them to make large sums of money online. And the commission will continue to pursue aggressively those who prey on people seeking to provide for themselves and their families. Now, obviously, this particular story is talking about one particular company, but there's so many companies out here that make these claims.
And more are getting signed. So first of all, I'm Polish. If you know anything about Polish, we are hardwired to define government. This is one of the instances where I side with government. I've been in this sphere for 14 years. And again, for me, as a clinician, but also as a human being, ethics is the most important thing. When you come into my programs, either for coaching or for mentoring or teaching you how to coach, I make only one promise. And that promise is that I will coach you till you make your money back. Right? So you're paying. I cannot guarantee you're going to get clients. I cannot guarantee you're going to get results, this and that. I can't because I'm not a future teller. I don't know if you're not going to get hit by a car tomorrow and had a traumatic brain injury. I don't know if you haven't disclosed half of your mental issues and come up that you are maybe bipolar and you're going to crash. I don't know. So that's the ethical part of it. And for any of us coaches, I mean, be honest, how many a day you are a coach to or have a podcast and all of that, how many times a day are you getting a message saying, promising 7 figures in 90 days? Or along one, I don't know what's the number now. It changes monthly. I think now we are up to 6 figure in a day kind of a scheme. And here is the reality. Kind of like with that ADHD story. Just because you've done this doesn't mean anyone else will be able to do it. I will give you my personal example. Most of my clients I get from podcasts and from networking. I am a freaking extrovert who loves to speak and put me in front of 100 people and I don't freeze. If I recommend that method to a client who has a speaking phobia, we're not going to get far, right? And I'm an ultra connector. I do 7, 8 referrals a week across my networks. I love connecting people. It's a skill that I love. I know people who, if they have to go to a networking group, they have a heart attack. So you can't take this model and say, it worked for me, it's going to work for you. If you implement the steps. So that's number one. Number two, I've worked with a few people who went through that thing and their self-esteem tanked. Because then a lot of those people turn around and say, you're not doing enough affirmations, you not have enough positive mindset, insert any other freaking gaslighting you want into this, without noticing, for example, that they just switched from an industry when their phone book, or I will date myself, the Rolodex, or your Facebook connections, or wherever, were in thousands, right? But you're talking to someone who is just studying. I have a friend a new acquaintance who I've been networking a lot with. He's totally new in his business. But he used to be a bank executive for 20 years. See where I'm going with this? And he can say, yeah, I just succeeded to close 7 accounts to this extent without mentioning that he's connected to the whole state, to all the banks. And all the high clients that used to be his clients while he ran the branches. So I think this is where they are getting really pointy. It's the same as using testimonials saying, see, they did it, you can do it. Versus just leaving a testimonial there. Testimonials are great, right? It's the validation, but it's a testimonial that you're not using to market your future self. Testimonial should be hanging on your Google page, on your LinkedIn account, and anywhere else, but you shouldn't be pushing it down people's throats saying, look, and this person did this, and this person did that. Because at the end of the day, coaching is just like any other business. And I think that's what we forget. In social media, we have so much of this. It's an easy business. It's a very low entry business, but it's not an easy business. It's a business like any other business. And either you have the business skills,
or you don't,
or you're going to fail. And, I'm a clinician turned coach businesswoman. And I've learned on my tushy, you know where I'm going with this. Oops, let's not do that again. And it's good to have network because then you listen to different people and you can ask questions and all of that. But I've made my mistakes. Last year, I hired a huge team, cured myself for this for a few years, learning curve. But I talk openly about it. I talk openly about the fact that when I started, we never relied on my income. I have a husband to fall on. My mortgage is not dependent on my coaching business. Some other things are, but we have food, house, and cars, if I'll fail, which is very different than telling a single mother to quit her job and start the coaching business. Why she's paying you $10,000, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
So that transparency is what they're going after. It's a very different thing for someone who's done nothing else but sells their whole life than to someone who has life experience and comes in and does it. Teachers, nurses, they've never had training in that. And that's, I think, what they are going after, especially in a business coaching sphere.
So if you were to give just coaches advice today, just some practical advice that they could really take away from this, what would you say to them?
Treat this as a true business and as a full-time job, and don't expect to have overnight results. Unless you have extreme sales background or a very expand network and you just transferring skill sets to coaching, right?
Right.
You're starting from zero. Understand that you're starting from zero. And this is going to be your full-time job. And it's going to be work. You're not going to wake up tomorrow and, you may hit a gold mine with the right ads, but even ads, unless you are very clean on your market and your messaging and have the budget for it and time to play, usually you don't convert.
Right.
Right? So be realistic is all what I'm saying. And understand that every promise on that internet, you are the product. You are the sell. You are the part of the funnel that you're going through. So make sure that what you're putting in is what you can afford to put in, both in time, energy, and money.
I love that. Thank you so much for this. I know this will just literally help so many people. Now, if anyone wanted to just connect with you further, and I'm speaking more so from a coach perspective, if we have plenty of coaches in the community, if they wanted to connect with you further, what does that process look like?
So I do have program for coaches. I closed down my business program for coaches for the purely reason that I'm launching my coaching certification that includes that business program for coaches. And that's launching in August. It is by invitation. So I screen people. I really want to make sure that you can succeed. If you're going to tell me that you're going to work 60 hours a week and take care of 2 children, and somehow you think you're going to complete this program, I'm going to tell you that it's not a good time for you. So you can find me on Facebook. You can find me at helptogrowinstitute.com. Email the same, info@helptogrowinstitute.com. Facebook is the easiest, LinkedIn as well. And I'm an open book, as I say. This is more of a mentoring program than a program per se. It's really hands-on. Obviously, it has the components of pre-recorded knowledge and all of that, but it's more of hand-holding and walking you through it. And no, it's not a weekend program. It's at least 6 months.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this. This has been amazing. I'm so grateful that we had the opportunity to connect. And until next time.
Thank you so much. See you around.
Queen, thank you so much for tuning in. It truly warms our heart that you're taking the time out of your day to connect with us. If you'd like to connect with our guests further, you can find their information located in the description section of this episode. And if you found this episode helpful, share with another queen, and don't forget to connect with the Holistic Sister Circle on Instagram and Facebook. And until next week, stay blessed. Mwah.